Welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast. I'm your host, Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Corey Moore. In the podcast, you will hear from some of the world's most dynamic people, providing you as a listener weekly access, lessons learned, and key principles about how to be a better father.
Welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Today, you're going to hear from Derrick Porter. Just amazing, jam-packed, full of great insights for dads.
Make sure you listen to this whole podcast because it's from beginning to end, great stuff. If you like the podcast, please like and subscribe where you get your podcasts and tell your friends. We're looking forward to this show.
Derrick, great to have you with us today. Thank you so much for coming and spending time with us on the Gentleman Project podcast.
Of course.
Tell us a little bit about first your professional career and what you do for a living, and then tell us a little bit about your family.
Certainly. I do something that I never thought I would do in my life, and that is I am in the beauty industry. And I did not grow up dreaming and thinking of selling hair or other hair products for a living, but here I am. It's been 14 years. It's been a wonderful ride. I serve as the CEO of Beauty Industry Group, a holding company that owns brands in the professional beauty industry. We have offices across the country and are headquartered here in Salt Lake City.
Awesome. And tell us a little bit about your family. I know them pretty well. And so I know how wonderful they are, but tell us a little bit about your family.
Thank you. 5 kids. It's a busy house. 14 years old is my oldest and 4 is my youngest, except we've got one more coming on the way here in the next 3 to 4 weeks. My wife is ready, and all of the kids are ready. 4 boys and a girl currently. This 6th one is the last one. And although that is what we said last time, and then COVID hit, and my wife felt really strongly that we were, to have one more. These kids are the love and the joy of our life. I mean, we have been so thankful in a way for these last 6+ months to spend this kind of time together. We're having it as a surprise for this 6th one as far as the gender is concerned. We don't know. No one knows. We have shielded our eyes from the ultrasounds, and so it's going to be a fun party and an exciting time here in the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Awesome.
That's awesome. So tell us what your kids and you have been doing during COVID to keep busy. You say it's been a great time. Share some of those experiences with us if you would, so that maybe we've got some dads that can learn from those things and make the experience of being home or homeschooling or whatever it is that they're facing. What are you doing to make that a positive thing?
Well, I would say it's changed and it's been dynamic a little bit throughout this process. And I'm a big believer in times and seasons. I used to say, hey, I've got to find the perfect work-life balance. And I kind of gave up on that because it just was really difficult to achieve. And instead, my wife and I, through a lot of discussion, have said, hey, let's try this times and seasons approach. And even with COVID, it was a similar experience and result. We probably spent the first 3 to 4 weeks, and my kids didn't see me because I was struggling and worried with every salon in the world being closed down overnight. We had prepared for a lot of things, but never prepared for that. And so they didn't see me for the first 3 or 4 weeks because I was pulling 18-hour days trying to keep the company afloat. But once we had, our legs under us and that was working, we then began to shift. And I tried to make up for that time and maybe spend a little bit more time at home than maybe I had in the office for those past 3 to 4 weeks. We have spent a lot of time. We've been going through all the Harry Potters. That's something I've never done before. My kids have been asking me for years to watch Harry Potter. And I used to have a rule. I wouldn't watch anything if it couldn't really happen in real life. And then I sat down and watched these Harry Potters. We're starting number 5 Friday night. We have it planned. And they've been amazing. And there's some really great, nuggets of wisdom coming from Dumbledore that I never knew about. And that's been a really fun opportunity and time for us.
That's cool. I'm sure your kids enjoy that time with you. Now, you do a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
Right? That probably changed.
Yeah. In fact, tonight at 10:15 will be my first flight since early March. And I'm flying out to LA tonight, and I have not been on a plane since then. Prior to, I think I flew north of 225,000 miles last year, mostly on Delta. And so it was a lot of nights, and that was kind of regular. Maybe that was a heavier year, but it's been about that for over a decade.
Wow. So you've obviously been on both sides now, very weighted to lots of travel and now no travel. Is there any adjustments that you've made in your business decisions in going forward, if there will be more balance, or are you going to kind of go back and hit it real hard? What's your plan?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the, COVID has brought a lot of disruption to all of our lives, and it's been a challenge. It's been hard. And we feel, the first 2 people that passed away in Utah from COVID, I knew both of them. And that was a real wake-up call. And so I do not want to downplay the seriousness of this. At the same time, it has provided a real opportunity for us to reset and to rethink. So we've come up with an acronym in our business called RISE. And the R stands for rethinking the organization. And so we have challenged our teams around the world to consider, what are we going to do differently now because of COVID-19? And how are we going to pivot and adjust? And one of those things is we don't need to be out on the road nearly as much as we thought we did. We have, actually never performed better in the history of our company than through COVID. And we've done it without a single person getting on an airplane. So tonight, next week, I've got a few things that I have to go do, and you have to have, the I in RISE stands for interconnectivity. We have to be having those human and people and face-to-face relationships, but a lot more of it can be done at home. And that means I can be home at night with my family, with my kids, and fulfilling those, obligations and duties as well.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. I think we can all learn from that.
So since we're neighbors and I know you pretty well, I know that you're a good father. And I'm assuming that you were taught some things in your youth that you now teach your kids. Tell us a little bit of some things that maybe your parents or your grandparents or whatever, what's some things that you learned when you were young that you now teach your kids?
Well, 2 things come to mind. And one of these you and I got to do together, which was really a result of something that I learned as a kid from my mom. And that was be spontaneous. 2 years ago or so, I called Corey on a Tuesday, and I said, hey, do you want to go to Disneyland with we each had 4-year-olds at the time, Friday? And he was like, yeah, let's go. So we bought tickets and we flew to Disneyland, and it was an amazing time.
It was awesome.
And we've even done it again since then.
Yeah.
And there's power in spontaneity with children. It breaks up the day-to-day. It allows for them to feel excitement and newness that comes from having something a little bit outside of the ordinary. And so my mom really instilled that in me without ever saying it, but I've sought to do that with my kids and to introduce a little bit of spice to life from taking those opportunities and allowing myself to be spontaneous and not too concerned with the day-to-day. Maybe a lesson from my father was really about just the value of hard work. Since I was a little kid, I got an allowance, but it wasn't enough to buy anything with my allowance. And, they kind of forced me in the beginning, maybe age 11 or so, to start mowing lawns for the widow down the street and to, have all of my own chores on Saturdays and what have you. And that began to roll and to build and to snowball into a value that I found and an enjoyment that actually came from getting my hands dirty and going out, and whether it was mowing lawns or painting house numbers on curbs. I did that for a lot of summers as a little boy. It instilled in me this value, this happiness that was actually derived from working hard. And that has stayed with me all of these days. And, I remember my dad saying, hey, he was engaged to someone to be married. She broke it off with him. It devastated him. Dad, how did you solve that? What did you do? I went to work. And that's stuck with me to say, hey, when times get hard, I go to work not as an escape, but actually as a therapeutic opportunity for me to go out and try to do things that, improve the space in which I'm working. And that's been something that stuck with me for decades now.
Well, and I know that you're teaching your kids that work ethic, because we've talked in the past, and that idea of being self-reliant. Tell us, and I know your oldest, you have actually is doing some great things that way. Tell us a little bit more about that, about what you're now doing with your kids to keep that legacy alive.
Well, my kids think we are the most unfair parents on the block and in the world, because they have to do everything. And I think it's awesome. I love getting to watch them go out and do it. And at first I had to learn, don't make it a battle. Let the natural consequence be the teacher or the principal in the matter. Instead of me saying, you've got to get this done and you get it done by such and such a time, we agree to expectations up front. Hey, you can do this as soon as that is done. And so they'll come and say, Dad, can I go do this? We'll have you done that. And let that be the police of it. It took me a little while to learn that. Otherwise, it just became a battle. So one of the things that we've done is we own a little duplex north of where we live. And my wife and I thought, what a great opportunity for our now 14-year-old, he was 13 at the time, to be the one to list this and post it and interview the people that are coming in, to collect the rent, take out the trash and mow the lawn and do everything. And would that teach him, would that give him the experiences? And so what we've sought to do in work is to say, what kind of experiences would allow for our kids to really learn something and thrive in addition to learning how to work hard? And so we actually care less about what they do and more about what the experience is that it will give. And so for my oldest who's doing this job, I mean, the poor kid, multiple Friday nights, for whatever reason, that's when the water breaks and the duplex gets flooded. And so he's up there tearing it out and ripping it up and redoing it. And we probably don't do a very good job for the poor tenants. We're trying our best, but we're not handymen. But wow, what a great experience he's learning.
So cool.
When something like that calls, you gotta do your duty. You gotta fulfill your obligation.
So what I'm hearing from you is you are a very purposeful parenting team, and you have discussions about making opportunities for your kids to learn. I think that's a really important point for all of us to internalize, because if we don't give and create structure opportunities for those kids, they don't just happen on their own. And unfortunately, in the world that we live in, we've kind of created the easiest life possible, right? Like, we've got the smartphones, we've got the fast cars, we've got the fast internet. We can have things delivered to our door, pretty much pay people to do what we don't want to do. And that experience is going to give your son like the biggest leg up in life ever, because he's going to always remember, man, I had to go do this property management stuff for my dad and in the duplex, and it was awful and amazing, because now he's learning things that most 13-year-old kids nowadays are not really learning those lessons. So what advice would you give fathers to analyze like their lives? What opportunities exist if you don't own a duplex? Do you have any other ideas that you can share that you've used with maybe your other kids, your younger kids, of how you've purposefully planned these things out to give opportunities and learning experiences to your kids?
Absolutely. As my wife and I have sat down and said, how are we going to do this? The two kind of principles that have come to mind as we look for these opportunities is, number one, be intentional, and number two, be courageous. To be a dad today takes a lot of courage, because the media and the world is telling you certain things about parenting and almost makes it look cool and attractive to do it in certain ways. So it takes a certain and real level of courage and intention. So another example is my second son down is really not a great lawn mower. He is not a great mower of lawns, and his lines are squiggly, and he often cuts the corner and leaves the grass. But there is a gentleman down the street who's just had a lot of like family challenges, and I noticed that he couldn't get his yard mowed but maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks. It was a real challenge. So my son and I walked down and said, hey, I've been looking for an opportunity to teach my kids how to work. Mr. So-and-so, would you be willing? He's not very good at it, but would you be willing to let him come over once a week and do this? And that older gentleman said, my gosh, absolutely. And that's happened for a couple of years now. And so there's my second son, Mitt is his name, and Mitt's there now every Saturday, mowing the lawn, not doing a great job, but it's okay. It's less about the work again. and more about the experience. So I think just looking around at needs in the neighborhood and or in the community, going to them with intention and saying, here's why I'm doing this. We're not looking for money, but would you help me help my son get this experience? People are pretty willing to let that kind of thing occur.
That's killer. Well, one of the reasons that I was so intrigued by the Gentleman Project from the beginning and what Kirk was doing with his kids, journaling experiences and giving them true north principles, was because I felt like I want to be a good father. I'm not so sure I'm doing that great. I like the idea of focusing on this and being purposeful, like you guys were saying. So I have lessons learned in my life of things that I wish I would have done a little bit different as a dad, right? Talk to us about any lessons learned or things that you say, man, if I would have tweaked this, or I would have done this a little bit differently, because I think sometimes those are where the greatest lessons for others can come.
Well, I have lots of those kind of lessons, and I'm grateful for them. Because this is part of the journey, and the joy is found in the journey. And that means you are not going to be perfect all the time. And I am not perfect, not even close to, all of the time. And so the first thing that comes to my mind with that question is I've learned the value in kneeling down eye to eye with one of my kids and saying, I'm sorry. I probably didn't do what I should have done there, or say what I should have said, or act how I should have acted. Will you please forgive me? And kids are so quick to forgive. We could learn a lot, because kids, that nature, who they are, they're like this flower that's open, right? And as they have trauma and hard things in life sometimes occur, that flower can get closed. But as dads, as we have an opportunity to kneel down eye to eye and say, son, I'm sorry, I goofed. Can you forgive me? That opens that up. And that helps them see and know and feel that this is a good world and that there's good things that are out there. So number one for me is really saying, I'm sorry. That goes a long ways. I've learned that often when I fail as a dad, it's when I'm not listening enough, and when I'm too quick to react or too quick to suppose or assume. And this hit me just honestly probably in the last 6 months. My fourth son, his motor is revved at like 6,800 RPMs. You know that, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, he is always on. And I love it. It's awesome. However, that can be hard at 10 o'clock at night when it's time for bed, or 7 o'clock in the morning when we should be getting ready for school. And it hit me like a brick about 6 months ago in the face, saying, you know what? You've been going about this all wrong. You're a dad, and a dad is a teacher. So start to teach your son why you're telling him certain things instead of just telling him what to do. And in the last 6 months, I have sought in it through experience after experience after experience to sit down with him and to say, hey, this is why, this is the purpose, and will you do it? And letting him then choose and have that, have as much choice in that as he can. And being a teacher first and foremost is what being a dad is. And the world would tell us a dad is you just give directions while you sit on the couch with the remote watching the NFL game. And maybe there's a little part of that in there at times. But being a teacher and realizing that has helped me in that relationship in a really big and powerful way.
Yeah, I think most fathers could learn from, it's okay to say you're sorry. You're still a man. You're still, in fact, that's really about what being a gentleman is all about.
Right.
And listening.
Right.
And I think as a human race, those two things we could do better at, for sure.
One thing that I loved that you said was getting on their level, right? Is my kids have gotten almost as tall as I am. I'm only 5'7", so my 13-year-old's about caught me. But getting down on their level instead of, like, even where I've noticed it even makes a difference, like where you stand. If you're on the stairs and you're above them, or if you're in the yard, like, to get on their level at eye level, especially with little kids, makes a huge difference, because then you don't seem like this big domineering dad figure that's mad. You can say some of the same things face to face, eye to eye with a kid, but you're also at that point very close to a hug.
Right.
Right. And I have noticed as a dad, when I get upset, I have to counteract whatever emotion or meanness or anger I have with the exact same ratio of love afterwards. Otherwise, there's ill feelings, or they harbor some, I hate to say it, but I think a lot of us see it as like fear, right? Because you're their dad, and most kids respect their dad. And when you get after them and then you don't follow that up with some sort of love, hey, bud, I know we screwed up. Maybe I lost my temper a little bit. I am sorry. Just like you said, I'm still your dad. I still love you. And guess what? I'm here for you. I'm your coach. Are we good? And when you say that to a kid, are we good? That gives them the opportunity to say, my dad's good with me. Can I be good with my dad? And that for me has been a really powerful tool when something goes awry, you lose your temper, something happens, and your kids, man, they're already disconnected enough. We don't need to push them that way.
Right.
So I loved what you said about getting on their level, though, because it makes that love right there. It's easy to follow it up with a hug. Hey, bud, are we good? And give them a hug, move on. For the psychology of a kid, that's everything.
Right. And for a dad, there is something that happens when you take an extra millisecond and you kneel down and you're face to face. My reaction, the way the power of the voice or whatever comes through, completely different when it's eye to eye. And so I do that a lot, with Grayson. And as a result of going through that, I don't think I can do it any other way now, because I am less quick to react. So it actually does something for me as well. It's not so much only just about what it does to him. I'm agreeing exactly with what you've said. That does something for me and for both parties, and that builds a relationship.
So, Derrick, I think lots of us as adults that are busy and are trying to have work-life balance, we're trying to find ways to connect with our kids. And you've mentioned some of those ways. Are there ways or tools or secrets that you have of connecting, like becoming close with your kids?
Well, it kind of goes back to that thought and principle of being intentional. And I think you have to show your kids you love them, but you have to tell them too. And I remember once early in my career, someone coming to me and saying, hey, all you really need is 12 solid minutes a day per kid of quality time, and they're good. And I thought about that for a while and wondered, do I subscribe to this or not? And in the end, I decided no. At least for me, in my situation, I need quality and quantity. You've got to have opportunity to spend time working and playing and talking and having midnight snacks. That's probably one of my kids' favorite things, is when I wake them up at midnight, and that could be 10 p.m., they don't know, and have a midnight snack together and be creating the ability to talk in a non-structured, loose, spontaneous environment where you can just listen to them. And, you talk about getting down on their level. I think the importance today of going to where your kid is something that I've been learning through COVID-19. Is I've always known what my kids are really interested in, but it hasn't necessarily been my interest. But as I've sought to come to them and to meet them where they're at, instead of trying to get them to come to me, some really fun things have happened. And yes, there's a few times where after 15 minutes of Minecraft on the Xbox or whatever, like I'm kind of done and spent with it, right? But again, not having it be about the what, but about the how, has allowed for some of those experiences to come. And so I think that, really being able to show those kids you love them and coupling that with telling them how you love them, at least for me and my children, has done, I hope, some impactful things.
That's really cool. Derrick, you've got a 14-year-old
right
at home. I have a 15-year-old at home and two 13-year-olds at home. Technology is a big thing.
Yep.
And we didn't grow up in a world that it was anything like what we're seeing our kids having to deal with right now. What's your social media policy at home? What's your technology policy at home? What's worked and what hasn't?
Well, this is something that's ongoing and that for us has been different for every kid based on where they're at. And as we've talked about technology and the power of technology, I mean, what an amazing thing, even for what we're doing right here. This didn't happen even 10 years ago. A podcast? What's a podcast? And it's a powerful thing that can enable success and for us to go to heights that we never thought we could. And at the same time, it can destroy us, and we can become addicted, and we can have challenges, and we can, get into all sorts of things that maybe just waste and whittle away time. So as we've talked about technology with our kids, we have said, hey, first off, in the Porter house, we're going to define and own our technology and not let it define and own us. So this is a tool that you have in your life, like a rake or a shovel. And let this thing, we want to go out and use it rather than it using us and whacking us in the head by accidentally stepping on the end or something like that. And so it's been something that's been dynamic. We're probably actually a little bit more loose in terms of not watching down to the minute how much time they play or not, but really, again, being intentional. So we try not to have it ever at the dinner table. And that's something I've had to improve on because we have offices in every time zone in North America. And we have others in Europe and the UK and in Asia as well. So the phone is always ringing. But I have to lead out, and I cannot be hypocritical. And I think I was a hypocrite in the first 8 or 10 years of having technology, because I would tell my kids, hey, you can't do that, you can't play that. But then a call would come in, and what do? I pick it up, and there I am, and I'm doing my thing, or a text, and I've got to look at it. So we have tried to firstly, and my wife really helps me with this, but lead out and not let the technology own me. Secondly, they each have a little bit of time in the day to do that. Technology is in common areas only. So, we have a rule, and Dad's included in that. My computer in my office faces the doors and the windows. Everybody can see what I'm doing at all times and places, because that way I can be authentic when I tell them this is why I need you to do that. So I try to follow those, exact rules as well. And I think in the summertime, they, end up spending 30 to 45 minutes a day, doing that. And but if we go on vacation, we don't take any with us. And it's amazing, those vacations, they don't ever miss it and go back. And so I think that this dependence on technology really is a challenge, as you said, that we never had before.
Yeah, I think all dads across the world right now are dealing with technology, good and bad. And I think you have some great thoughts there. I've already picked up a bunch of fantastic how to be a better father nuggets from you. Let's talk about some less. If you were to teach your kids, 2 or 3 lessons, or maybe there's just one, right? What are your top, when you're done and your kids are gone and you look back on being a dad, what are the couple of things that you definitely want to make sure that they know or that they've internalized?
Well, aside from being kind and accepting of all people, which is something we talk about a lot, the Porter family, we talk about this all the time, but the Porter family believes in the underdog. We believe in helping other people and in making their life better. That's what we do. That's why we exist. That's what we're focused on. So aside, though, from being kind and accepting of all people, which we talk about a lot, it's probably to build and to help them have a grit and a determination to be able to plow through life. There are hard and challenging things that hit all of our children and us as adults in ways that are deeper and harder than it did a generation ago. And we have to recognize that and talk about that in advance of it happening. And this is something that I think can be hard for young people. And the only way that I know of how to teach that grit and determination and perseverance is a couple things. One, to try to let them see me fail and how I react when I fail and what kind of words I use and if I'm venomous or not, or if I blame other people. And those have become great teaching moments. And I fail all the time with products at work or with meetings or things that occur. And so I try to have them in my world enough, just as I try to get in their world, I try to have them in my world so that they can see that, how we react. And then secondly is how to just not be soft and to keep going when that going gets tough. And that has been done through doing hard work. There's something about just getting out and working with your hands and doing challenging things, regardless of how good or bad the quality is. And I hope that leads to building that grit and determination. And then maybe finally is just not to be entitled. I think it's pretty easy to be entitled today. And one day my wife told me, she's like, you are entitled. It's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean I'm entitled? And then she said, you get on the airplane and you expect to be seated quickly. You expect a good seat. You expect you to be greeted by Mr. Porter at the hotel. And she told me all these things. And I thought, holy cow, I'm kind of a snob and I've got to work on that. And so how do I go about not being entitled? And that's been a challenging thing in this world that rewards certain things that the world would view as success, but helping my kids understand what success really is and kind of predefining that in their lives when they're young, helping them define that and choose it, has led to some neat discussions and conversations for our family.
Awesome. Derrick, if you could say, based on your interactions with people, conversations with other fathers, what's the one thing that guys are struggling with in fatherhood, and how do we solve it?
Well, it's a great question. And, this is something that, I'm a big believer in fathers and their impact. You want to see communities be rebuilt. You want to see great philanthropic things be started. You want to see any successes in the world come about. Plant a father in the room, giving an opportunity to teach and be there along the way for a decade or two, and then watch and see what happens. You want to know how to change the world? Bring good fathers into that picture and help that to be able to thrive and survive. So this question of what the biggest challenge today is, I don't know for the world, and I don't really know for the neighborhood, but I know for me, and maybe there's some that would subscribe to this or appreciate this, and it's to be present. It is so easy today to not be present with your kids. Technology can be one of those things, but certainly business is one of those things. Civic or other, religious responsibilities can be one of those things. As we accumulate more possessions as a people, we become possessed by our possessions. And everything that we own takes a little piece of us away. And the world would say rich people own things, but things really own rich people. And by the way, what's rich? I don't know. But things, possessions that we accumulate and bring into our life begin to own us, and it takes a little piece away. And therefore, I suddenly become not present. But I rationalize it saying, it's okay, look what I do for my kids. And so at my work, we have a wall, and it talks about our big goal for the year, and everybody writes in chalk what they're going to do. And mine for this year is be present. And if I can just do that and turn away from those possessions and those accumulations, those things that really don't matter and will go the way of the earth in time, I would hope that will have some really positive consequences in a good way. But it takes a long time to realize them.
Derrick, do you have any favorite memories of fatherhood or favorite moments where you say, oh man, being a father was either rewarding or I saw that my kids got something I taught them? Do you have any favorite stories of fatherhood?
Well, it's hard for me to pick one because there's probably 1,000 experiences that have been emblazed in my mind. And I think one of the reasons is I started parenting when the iPhone kind of came out. And so now I can go back and scroll And I can literally see these pictures and videos of my kids growing up over the years. And I do that occasionally. And man, that brings back some really fun, great memories. And that's something that generations past didn't really have. And I'll share that with them sometimes, 10 years ago today, 8 years ago today. And so there's really been 1,000, but maybe one or two stand out. In the very earliest of days, I was struggling to start a business. We made no money. We lived in a barn, like a real barn with curved walls. You hit your head. You could vacuum without moving. You just went in one 360-degree circle and vacuumed the entire barn because we had no money. And I was in school, kind of trying to go to school while starting this business. My wife was finishing her schooling, and she was working nights as an RN doing labor and delivery up at the local hospital. We never saw each other, but I had to come home at like 4 o'clock, which was really hard to do, to break away in our business back then to watch our son so that she could go to work, because she was the breadwinner by a long ways. And so I would do that 3-ish nights a week. And I look back and remember those nights now. And he was my oldest. He is just very even kill, a chill little dude. And he's been that way since he was little. So I would get him in his like car seat thing, and we would go to Iggy's 3-4 nights a week and sit down and watch the games, because we couldn't afford cable TV. And we would watch football, basketball, whatever's on. And he would sit right there on the stool at the bar with me. And he could sit for 3 hours, and everybody was amazed that he just would sit there. But I look back on those kind of things in that time that I was forced to take, which I would never have done otherwise if the circumstances were different. But because I was trying to support my wife and letting her work and go out and achieve and do things that were big and not having her be there to serve me, it forced me to come home and do that. And that happened really until 6 or 7 years. Well, she probably retired from doing that about 7 years ago. And I cherish those times, those opportunities.
I have a very similar experience of my wife going back to school to be a nurse, and the decision was, do we put our youngest in daycare, or do we find someone to watch her while I go work and Karen goes to school, or do I stay home, have that experience? And we still refer to those days as Daddy Paisley days. And they are a bookmark that I cannot believe the detail in which my 4-year-old remembers those days. She'll remember the music that we listened to while we folded laundry. She's a huge Johnny Cash fan because of that, because it was always Roger Miller and Johnny Cash. And we'll hear one of those songs, and she'll go, Dad, Daddy Paisley days, folding laundry on the bed, dancing. You want to have a dance party again?
Wow.
And those memories are just emblazoned in both of our minds, because it enabled me, like you said, kind of by no choice of my own, to have those. And those memories are just priceless.
Yeah.
So Thank you for sharing that.
So another question for you, Derrick, is if you had to take a step back and ask yourself, what is being successful as a father, right? If you were done and you said, was I successful? What does that look like to you? What would you say a successful father embodies?
Well, to me, it certainly is not the dollars in the bank. It certainly is not the size of the house. It certainly is not where you vacationed over the holidays. None of that stuff matters or defines success. To me, it really comes about probably when they're about 20 years old, and you look back and say, what kind of a relationship do I have with my son or daughter? The world would have us outsource our kids. There's every summer camp, every band camp, everything that you can imagine. And we have to be really careful about picking and choosing how and when we're going to outsource things to our kids. And one of the challenges with this, you mentioned the word investment, and at the same time as finding success for your children and how you define that. Investing in your kids is a payoff that you don't see for a couple of decades. And so what happens is, going into the office, I can see a return on my investment pretty quickly in a period of days to weeks or maybe months, depending on the size of the project. But taking that opportunity to invest in the relationship with my kids will not be seen or felt until they're maybe 20 years old. And so for me, taking that time to recognize that this is a long-term investment, there is not necessarily going to be an immediate, sustaining, validating result, but knowing it's coming in the future. And so, 5 years from now with my oldest and 20 years from now with our new little baby that's coming, if I can look back and say, wow, we've got a relationship where they still come in the door to see mom and dad and they want to give me a hug, and we have opportunity to talk about real things and hard things, and they'll bring it up with me and they know they're not going to be judged, and hopefully that I'm going to listen. To me, that feels successful.
Killer. Thanks for that, Derrick. Any habits that you've found as a dad that have helped you, things where you say, I just do this on a consistent basis because if I do these things, I know it's going to help me be a better dad? Are there things like that you do?
Yes. And maybe they weren't done purposely with intent at the start for this reason, but later in life, as I've looked back and seen the result with or without it, it's felt better. One of those things is for me, I take an hour every morning and just prepare for the day. And that's taking time to, whether it's pray, meditate, study, plan, think about what it is that my kid needs the most for that week, and then planning that into my schedule to make sure I can do that. Preparation goes a long, long ways. And so for me, that's something that's like maybe the most precious hour of my day is that, earlier morning time frame. I actually lock the door, put the phone on Do Not Disturb, and put earplugs in, whether I'm in my office or in Salt Lake City or my home, so that I can really focus. And that's gone a long ways. Another thing is just getting outside and exercising. I love, mountain biking and doing some of those types of activities. And when I go and do that, it allows for me to feel re-energized and refreshed. And I'm just convinced, meeting all these people on the trails, that people are happier that have opportunity to be outside. And that could be golf, it could be working in the yard. I don't know what it is, but there's some magic, that's there. And then maybe the third thing is just, I believe in hard work. I believe that if you're going to work, you've got to do it well and you've got to do it right. Again, times and seasons, and through consultation with my wife so that we're on the same page, and our times and seasons generally will overlap. But probably my favorite thing to do is at the end of a night, when I've worked long and hard after the kids have gone down, plugged back in, got some stuff done, and to go through to each of their rooms real quick and just take a second and check in on them and look at them. I am filled with this just sense of love, of humility, and of determination to keep going and to keep trying, and that things will be okay. And it removes the fears that sometimes bubble up and come during the day. And so for me, by starting the day right and ending it right, I can get through the next day somehow. And the world encourages us in a way to be fearful and tells us why we should be so concerned and scared. But I find myself being full of hope for them, and then hopefully they can feel that and have the confidence that everything's going to be okay.
Derrick, I think you're going to get a lot of people that are going to want you to retire as the CEO of Big and be their personal fatherhood coach.
But and that is so kind of you to say. But I have to mention here, the times I've messed up versus won, it's probably greater. I've probably made more mistakes than the times where maybe I've won. At least it feels that way. But I'm thankful for it because we're going through it together. And That's no different than what these kids are doing at school, every day, right? They wake up, put their uniform on, put their, whatever it is they have to wear to school, and they go out and there's uncertainty. And so-and-so, am I going to have friends on the playground? Are people going to sit by me at the assembly? There's all these fears. There's all these things. There's these mistakes. And I have failed a lot in the last, 14 years of being a dad. But it's okay because that's life and we're scrappy. And thankfully it's maybe because of going back to these kids often and having to say I'm sorry because I mess up so often, it's somehow enabled our family, I think, to have a lot of love and hope and to learn a lot of lessons. And most of everything that I share here is from some other friend of mine telling me as we've talked about it. And I've learned a lot from Corey. Standing in the long lines at Disneyland, we probably stood together in lines for hours and hours and hours our first trip. And I have learned a lot from getting to just talk. So I'm a big, big fan of what you guys are doing here with this podcast. What better way to learn from people who have failed and what they've done differently to try to succeed in the future.
Right, and I think that's what we're trying to do here is create a community that starts a dialogue of fatherhood, because I don't think that there's a natural place in our lives that it happens. And we've got some Gentleman Project groups that meet, they go to lunch together, they commit to be better fathers with each other, they set goals together, and then the next month you get back together and say, hey, how'd that go? Did that work for you? No, I didn't do it. Well, I'm not going to judge you for not doing it, but what can I help you with so that it gets done for the sake of you and your kids and your family this month? And non-judgmental zone and, just saying, hey, we're going to get together and we're not going to talk about business. We're not going to talk about golf. We're not going to talk about politics or religion. We're going to get together and purposely talk about how you doing as a dad and how can we as other dads help you to create an atmosphere of love in your home as it relates to your kids. And those have been some of the most powerful conversations I've ever had and some of the most powerful and strongest friendships I've ever created. And I don't know, there's a magic in it, and we hope that that translates through this podcast, that you can feel that this podcast comes from a place of love and community, so that if you're listening to this and you go, man, that was really cool, and it resonated with me, I'm going to go home and try that. If you've got a story of maybe taking one of these nuggets, taking it home, and a success story, we'd love you to share that with us. Reach out to us. You can email us at info@thegentlemanproject.com, and we'd be happy to share those on a future podcast, because that's what we're trying to do here, is create community of fathers and give people a place to have this dialogue that's so rare in today's world. So, Derrick, thank you so much for being with us today, taking the time out of your schedule. We wish you a great flight tonight, and we say thank you, and we look forward to learning from you in the future. It's great to meet you. Thank you.
Thanks, Derrick. That was amazing. You've inspired me again to be a better father like you have many other times. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks to you both for having me. This has been such a fun opportunity to think about, prepare, plan, and even discuss and sit down with my wife and reevaluate how am I doing. So I think I've gotten far more out of this than maybe anyone else has, and thanks for that opportunity.
Corey, I hope that everybody was listening closely during that podcast. There were some great things in there. One of my favorites, I think, was the strategic and thought out intentional way that Derrick and his wife parent, and getting down on eye level with their kids and communicating, and the spontaneity. I mean, if you missed any of that stuff, I'd go back and listen to it again. I know I'm going to listen to this podcast several times, and I'll probably take notes.
Yeah, I'm going to get my notebook out. I'm going to listen. Derrick inspires me to be a better father. We really appreciate him being on the podcast. If you like this podcast, like and subscribe to The Gentleman Project wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, everyone.